She had maybe 20 seconds to decide. Let the disaster unfold according to the rules, or break every regulation about diplomatic intervention and fix it herself. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. When you see a fire, you don't wait for permission to grab the bucket. Leora stood abruptly. Every head turned. Kael's expression flickered. Surprise, warning, something else. She walked directly to the servants' approach, intercepting them before they reached Nathari's position. By violating every protocol about servant interaction and menu oversight? Would you prefer I let them serve the insult? His jaw tightened. Explain, quickly. She did, words tumbling out in a rushed whisper. The switched course, the cultural meaning, the 3-minute delay she'd bought. Kael's expression went deadly. Someone sabotaged the menu. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. He stood smoothly, crossed to where Celine stood monitoring the feast logistics. Spoke quietly. Celine's face went white. 2 minutes later, the correct course appeared. The Southern Isles fish preparation, perfectly executed, placed before Ambassador Nathari with appropriate ceremony. Nathari smiled, crisis averted. But across the hall, Lady Thorne sat rigid in her seat, her expression promising murder. The feast continued without further incident. Leora maintained her composure through 7 more courses, endless diplomatic small talk, and the growing certainty that she'd just declared war on the most vindictive person in Blackridge. When the ceremony finally ended and guests dispersed to evening entertainment, Kael gestured for her to follow him. They walked in silence through corridors emptied for the festival, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. He led her to a private study, smaller than his main office, less severe, almost comfortable. Sit, he said. She sat. Kael poured 2 glasses of something amber and potent, handed her one, then positioned himself by the window. That was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. I haven't decided which. I prevented a diplomatic incident by creating a different one. You countermanded approved arrangements, intervened with serving staff, made unilateral decisions about international protocol. Someone sabotaged the menu to cause exactly the crisis I prevented. Probably Thorne, given her access and motivation. Probably, Kael agreed, which means you just publicly humiliated her, again. Should I have let the insult happen? No. He took a drink. But you should have alerted me first, followed the chain of command, allowed me to handle it through proper channels. There wasn't time. There's always time to follow protocol. Not when the protocol would have failed. Leora met his gaze. You built Blackridge on order and control. I respect that. But order isn't the same as rigidity. Sometimes situations demand flexibility, improvisation, the ability to see a disaster coming and act before the system catches up. Chaos, Kael said softly. Controlled chaos. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment. You're not machine-like at all, are you? Her blood went cold. What? Your credentials, your references? They described someone who operates like clockwork, but you don't. You operate on instinct and improvisation. You see patterns, yes, but you respond to them creatively rather than systematically. This was it. The moment the lie collapsed. The moment everything ended. I can learn, she said, hating how desperate she sounded. I can be more systematic. I don't want you to be more systematic. She blinked. I'm sorry? Kael set down his glass. When I contracted for a queen, I wanted a mirror. Someone who thought like I thought, who valued what I valued. Someone who would reinforce the systems I'd built. And instead you got me. Instead I got someone who challenges those systems, who sees their weaknesses, who isn't afraid to break rules when the rules would cause harm. He moved closer. Do you know how long it's been since anyone in this territory challenged me? I'm guessing never? Never. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Everyone follows the rules. Everyone defers to my judgment. Everyone maintains order because order is safe, but safety isn't the same as strength. And I'm beginning to suspect that Blackridge's greatest weakness is that no one here remembers how to think for themselves. Leora's mind reeled. So, you're not angry? Oh, I'm furious. You violated protocol. You took unilateral action. You embarrassed a council member in front of international witnesses. Then why aren't you firing me? Because you were right. He said it simply, like admitting a fundamental truth. About the menu, about Thorne's sabotage, about the need for flexibility. You were right, and I would have been wrong if I'd followed procedure. She didn't know what to say. Kale continued, but being right doesn't make you safe. Thorne will retaliate. The court is already dividing into factions. Those who see you as a necessary disruption and those who see you as a threat to everything Blackridge stands for. You've made yourself a target. I know. Do you? He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Because targets in Blackridge don't just face professional consequences. Thorne has connections, resources, people loyal to her who won't hesitate to remove obstacles through unofficial channels. Are you saying she'd actually... I'm saying be careful. Lock your doors. Trust no one you haven't vetted personally. And if anything feels wrong, anything, you come to me immediately. Leora's hands tightened around her glass. Why do you care? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kael's expression went carefully neutral. You're contracted to Blackridge. That makes your safety a territorial concern. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight. He turned toward the door, then paused. The improvisation tonight, the quick thinking, don't lose that, but learn to channel it through systems rather than around them. Chaos is useful. Uncontrolled chaos is deadly. I'll remember. Good. He opened the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we deal with the fallout. Leora returned to her apartment and discovered the first warning. Her door wasn't locked. She always locked it. Always. The habit was bone deep from years of living in bad neighborhoods. But now the door stood slightly ajar, light spilling through the gap. Her pulse spiked. She pushed it open slowly. The apartment looked normal at first glance. Same furniture arrangement, same scheduled posted on the wall, same everything. Then she saw the message. Someone had rearranged her desk items into a pattern, pens forming letters, books positioned to spell words. Know your place, simple, clear, threatening. Leora's hand shook as she searched the apartment. Nothing else disturbed, no one hiding, just the message and the violation of her space. She thought about Kael's warning, about Thorne's resources, about people who removed obstacles through unofficial channels. She should report this, should follow protocol, should alert security. Instead, she took a photo of the message with her personal device, then carefully restored everything to its original position. If someone wanted to play intimidation games, fine. But Leora had grown up dodging loan sharks and surviving her father's creditors. She knew how threats worked, and she knew that showing fear was worse than showing strength. But the next morning brought a council emergency session. Leora arrived to find the chamber tense with unspoken hostility. Thorne sat rigid in her seat, her expression carved from ice. Ravik looked grimly amused. Other council members arranged themselves into clear factions, some near Thorne, some pointedly distant. Kael entered last, his presence immediately commanding silence. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Ambassador Nathari filed a formal complaint this morning, not about the feast, about the fact that proper protocols weren't followed in preventing the insult. Leora's stomach dropped. She claims, Kael continued, that having the contracted queen intervene with serving staff rather than through proper diplomatic channels demonstrates Blackridge's instability, that we can't maintain our own systems without improvisation. Because we can't, Thorne said, her voice acid. Miss Hale's interference, however well-intentioned, proved exactly what I've been saying. Allowing sentiment and improvisation into governance creates chaos. We had protocols for addressing menu issues. She ignored them. The protocols would have been too slow, Leora countered. By the time proper channels addressed the problem, the insult would have been served. Then the insult should have been served, Thorne snapped. And we would have handled the diplomatic fallout through established procedures. Instead, you created a spectacle that made Blackridge look unstable. I made Blackridge look responsive, adaptive, capable of preventing disasters rather than just managing them after they happen. You made Blackridge look weak. Enough. Kael's voice cut through the argument. The damage is done. The question is how we respond to Nathari's complaint. Formally censure Miss Hale, Thorne said immediately. Acknowledge the protocol violation. Reassure our allies that such improvisation won't happen again. Throw me under diplomatic wheels to maintain appearance of control, Leora translated. Great plan. Do you have an alternative? Thorne asked with poisonous sweetness. Yes. Own it. Tell Nathari that Blackridge values both order and adaptability, that we maintain strict protocols while also trusting our leadership to make judgment calls when situations demand it. Frame it as strength, not weakness. That's not how international diplomacy works. Isn't it? Leora leaned forward. Every territory here respects Blackridge's order, but they also fear our rigidity. They see us as predictable, controllable. If we show we can adapt without losing structure, we become more dangerous, more unpredictable, harder to manipulate. Silence stretched. Lord Ravik spoke up. She's not entirely wrong. Predictability is a tactical weakness. Military perspective, Thorne dismissed. This is diplomacy, where perception is everything, Ravik finished. And right now, the perception is that Blackridge caught and prevented sabotage in real time. That's impressive, not weak. The council divided further, voices rising in argument. Kyle let them debate for exactly 3 minutes, then raised one hand. Instant silence. We'll draft a response that acknowledges the protocol deviation while framing it as rapid threat assessment. Ravik, you'll work with Miss Hale on the language. Thorne, you'll review for diplomatic implications. We present a united message by end of day. Thorne's expression could have melted steel. As you wish, Your Majesty. The session ended. As people filed out, Kale caught Leora's arm. A word. When they were alone, he spoke quietly. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm just trying to survive. By challenging Thorne at every turn, that's not survival, that's suicide with extra steps. What am I supposed to do? Let her sabotage me without response? You're supposed to be smart about it. His grip tightened slightly. Thorne has been consolidating power for years. She has allies, resources, blackmail material on half the territory. You have… what? Clever arguments and good instincts? I have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if you're dead. He released her arm. I can protect you from official consequences. But if Thorne decides to remove you through unofficial means, there's only so much I can do. So stop giving her ammunition. By shutting up and following orders? By picking battles you can win. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Leora, lock your doors. He left before she could ask how he knew about the message. Basut. The message arrived that evening. Not another desk arrangement. Something worse. Leora found it slipped under her door, a formal document bearing Blackridge's official seal. Performance Review Notice. The Royal Council has initiated a formal evaluation of Contract Queen Leora Hale's adherence to territorial protocols. Review period, 30 days. Failure to demonstrate satisfactory protocol compliance may result in contract termination and forfeiture of all compensation. Evaluation criteria include but are not limited to appropriate deference to council authority, adherence to established procedures, emotional restraint in official proceedings, and maintenance of diplomatic decorum. Evaluating Authority. Lady Morgana Thorne, Chief Financial Administrator. Leora read it 3 times. Thorne had just weaponized the bureaucracy against her. For the next 30 days, every action would be scrutinized, every deviation recorded, every improvisation used as evidence of incompetence. 1 month to prove she could be the perfect, controlled, machine-like queen she'd lied about being, or lose everything. Her hands started shaking. She crumpled the notice, then smoothed it out again. Think, there had to be a way through this. She could conform, play perfectly by the rules, become exactly what they wanted. But she'd seen what that cost. Watching Kael's humanity buried under layers of control. Seeing the court operate like automatons, feeling the slow death of anything resembling actual life. Or she could fight, find proof of Thorne's corruption, expose the sabotage, force the confrontation. But fighting meant risking everything. Her contract, her family's security, maybe even her life. Leora stared at the notice until the words blurred. 30 days. She thought about her brother's acceptance letter to engineering school, about her mother's treatment schedule. about the deed to their land, finally clear of liens. She thought about the look in Kael's eyes when he'd said order wasn't the same as rigidity. She thought about who she'd have to become to survive this, and who she'd have to stop being. The choice crystallized with painful clarity. She couldn't win by being perfect. Perfection was Thorne's game, played on Thorne's board with Thorne's rules. But chaos? Chaos was hers. Leora pulled out her personal device and started making notes. If Thorne wanted a performance review, fine. She'd get one, just not the one she expected. The next morning, Leora requested a meeting with Lord Ravik. He received her in his military command office, a space that managed to be both organized and lived in, maps covering walls, strategic documents arranged in working stacks. Miss Hale? He gestured to a chair. I assume this is about Thorne's performance review? How did you... The whole council knows. She made sure of it. He leaned back. 30 days to prove you can follow rules you clearly have no interest in following. She's betting you'll either conform and become useless or rebel and give her cause to terminate your contract. That's an accurate summary. So what do you want from me? Information. Leora met his gaze. You said Thorne has blackmail material on half the territory. What does she have on you? Ravik's eyebrows rose. Direct. I appreciate that. He considered. Old military records. Strategic decisions that could be reinterpreted as war crimes if someone wanted to be creative about international law. She's been holding them over me for 3 years. And you let her? I let her because the alternative was watching my soldiers get dragged through tribunal proceedings for following my orders. His expression hardened. Thorne collects leverage the way some people collect art. She doesn't use it unless necessary, but everyone knows she has it. It keeps people compliant. But not you. Not entirely. I follow the rules enough to avoid giving her ammunition, but I don't love her, and I'm not loyal to her. Just to Blackridge. And to the king who saved my career when others wanted me court-martialed for being too effective at warfare. Ravik studied her. Why are you asking? Because I need to know who's actually dangerous versus who's just afraid. Leora pulled out her device. I spent last night digging through public records, financial disclosures, trade agreements, infrastructure contracts, and I found something interesting. She showed him the data. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock to cold fury. She's been embezzling? Not directly, too obvious, but she's been routing territorial funds through shell companies, then back through consulting fees and administrative overhead. Small percentages, spread across dozens of accounts, perfectly legal on paper, completely corrupt in practice. How much? Over 10 years? Roughly 8 million in territorial currency. Ravik whistled. That's enough to fund the entire education system you fought to protect. I know. Leora leaned forward. I also know that if I present this to the council, Thorne will claim I fabricated it, that I'm desperate to avoid her performance review. She'll use her leverage to force allies to dismiss the evidence. It'll be my word against hers, and she's been building credibility for years. So what's your plan? I need someone with military authority to verify the findings independently. Someone whose reputation for integrity is beyond question. Someone Thorne can't easily threaten. Ravik smiled slowly. You want me to audit her financial records? I want you to protect Blackridge from corruption. What you discover in that process is just unfortunate consequences for people who've been stealing from the territory. And if I do this, if I find evidence and present it to the king, then Thorne's performance review becomes the least of her problems. He sat back, fingers steepled. You're asking me to start a war. I'm asking you to finish one. Thorne started this when she sabotaged the diplomatic feast. I'm just responding strategically, with controlled chaos, with evidence and truth. Ravik was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. I'll need 3 days to conduct a proper audit. Can you survive 3 days under Thorne's scrutiny without giving her cause to terminate? I'll be a perfect angel. Somehow I doubt that, but he smiled. 3 days, Miss Hale. Try not to start any other wars in the meantime. Leora left Ravik's office and returned to her apartment, adrenaline singing through her veins. 3 days. She could do 3 days of perfect compliance, 3 days of following every rule, meeting every expectation, being exactly what the contract specified. And then? Then she'd prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could be in a kingdom built on control wasn't chaotic, it was right. She opened her door and froze. Someone had been inside again. This time the message was written across her bathroom mirror in red lipstick. Last warning. Lyora stared at her reflection beneath the words. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't quicken. She took another photo, added it to her evidence file. Then she calmly wiped the mirror clean, locked every window, wedged a chair under her door handle, and set 3 different alarm apps on her device. If Thorn wanted her afraid, she'd be disappointed, because Lyora had grown up scared. Scared of creditors, scared of losing her home, scared of watching her family fall apart. This was just another threat, and she'd survived worse. The 3 days of perfect compliance felt like wearing someone else's skin. Lyora followed every protocol, arrived at every meeting exactly on time, spoke only when directly addressed, deferred to council authority with mechanical precision. She became the perfect, emotionless machine Kyle had originally contracted for. It was suffocating, but it was also strategic. Every perfect action was a chess piece positioned. Every flawless execution was armor against Thorn's evaluation. Every moment of controlled behavior bought Ravik time to complete his audit. On the morning of the 3rd day, she attended a territorial development meeting where Thorn presented a proposal to restructure the agricultural subsidies, naturally routing more funds through her preferred contractors. The old Lyora would have challenged it immediately. The new Lyora sat perfectly still and said nothing. Thorn's smile was triumph wrapped in silk. No objections from our contract queen? How refreshing. The proposal appears well documented, Lyora replied with careful neutrality. I defer to the council's expertise. Kyle's gaze flickered to her, questioning, maybe disappointed, but she kept her expression blank. The meeting continued. Thorn's proposal passed unanimously, and Lyora felt something inside her start to crack. That afternoon, Ravik requested an emergency council session. Lyora arrived to find the atmosphere electric with tension. Ravik stood at the head of the table with a stack of documentation that looked like it could double as a murder weapon. Thorn sat rigid, her expression unreadable, but her knuckles white against the armrest. Kyle entered last, his presence immediately commanding attention. Lord Ravik, you called this session. Explain. I've completed a financial audit, Ravik said. At the request of territorial security protocols, I reviewed all major council expenditures over the past decade. What I found is concerning. He activated the display screen. Numbers flooded across it. Transaction records, shell company formations, routing patterns that looked like someone had tried to hide a river by splitting it into 1,000 tiny streams. Over the past 10 years, Ravik continued, approximately 8.3 million in territorial funds have been diverted through a network of consulting firms and administrative contractors. The funds were routed through multiple accounts, then returned to Blackridge as overhead costs and efficiency consultations. On paper, everything appears legitimate. In practice, it's systematic embezzlement. Silence crashed through the chamber. Thorn stood slowly. This is absurd. Those transactions were all properly documented and approved. By you, Ravik interrupted. Every single routing went through your office. Every contractor shares financial ties to your family holdings. Every consulting fee was inflated by precise percentages that stayed just below audit thresholds. You're accusing me of corruption based on coincidence and paranoid conspiracy theories. I'm accusing you based on evidence. Ravik's voice was steel. Evidence that's been verified by 3 independent financial analysts. Evidence that shows a pattern of systematic theft from the territory you swore to serve. Thorn's composure cracked. This is a setup. Someone fabricated these records to discredit me. Her gaze snapped to Lyora. She did this. The desperate little fraud who lied her way into a contract she's not qualified for. She manufactured evidence to avoid my performance review. All eyes turned to Lyora. Her pulse hammered, but she kept her voice level. I provided Lord Ravik with initial findings from public records. He conducted the independent audit. The evidence speaks for itself. Public records that you manipulated. I can't manipulate transaction logs from the territorial banking system, Lyora said. I don't have that access. I don't have that expertise. All I did was notice patterns and report them to appropriate authority. You noticed convenient patterns exactly when you needed ammunition against me. I noticed patterns that have existed for years, that nobody bothered to investigate because you've made everyone too afraid to question you. Thorne's face went white with rage. You arrogant, presumptuous, enough. Kael's voice cut through the argument like a blade. He studied the evidence on screen, his expression unreadable. Lord Ravik, you're certain of these findings? Absolutely certain, Your Majesty. I've triple verified every transaction. The pattern is undeniable. Kael turned to Thorne. Response? The transactions were legitimate administrative functions. 8 million in legitimate functions that all flowed back to your family's accounts? Ravik challenged. That's not administration, that's theft. Thorne's hands curled into fists. I have served Blackridge for 15 years. I've maintained financial stability through economic crises. I've increased territorial revenue by 40%. And you're going to believe fabricated accusations from a jumped-up contract queen who can't follow basic protocol? I believe verified evidence, Kael said quietly, from a military commander whose integrity is beyond question. Then you're a fool. The words escaped before Thorne could stop them. The chamber went deadly silent. Calling the king a fool was beyond insubordination. It was professional suicide. Thorne seemed to realize her mistake immediately. Your Majesty, I apologize. I spoke in anger. You spoke truth, Kael interrupted. Perhaps the only truth you've spoken in years. You think I'm a fool for trusting evidence over your reputation, for believing that someone who's served for 15 years could also be corrupt for 15 years. He stood, and the temperature in the room dropped. Lady Morgana Thorne, you are hereby suspended from all council duties pending formal investigation. All access to territorial finances is revoked immediately. You will surrender all official documentation and account credentials within the hour. Thorne's face cycled through shock, rage, and something that looked almost like fear. You can't do this. I have allies. I have leverage. Had, Ravik corrected. Past tense. Because whatever leverage you think you have, it stops mattering the moment you're charged with embezzlement. This isn't over. Thorne's gaze swept across the council, landing on each member. Every single one of you who stays silent now will regret it. I know things. I have records. I can destroy security, Kael said calmly. 2 guards entered. Thorne looked at them, then at Kael, then at the council members who wouldn't meet her eyes. You'll regret this, she said to Leora. All of you will, but especially you. She walked out flanked by guards, her dignity shredded but her threats hanging in the air like poison. When the door closed, the chamber erupted. This is chaos, said Master Chen. Thorne managed half our financial operations, which we'll redistribute, Ravik said, properly this time, with oversight. The allies she mentioned will either present evidence of wrongdoing or remain silent, Kael interrupted. This council will not be held hostage by threats of exposure. If others are corrupt, they'll be investigated. If they're not, they have nothing to fear. He dismissed the session. As people filed out, some looking relieved, others terrified, Kael gestured for Leora to remain. When they were alone, he poured 2 drinks and handed her one. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, he said, or the stupidest. Leora's hands shook as she took the glass. I'm leaning towards stupid. She meant those threats. Whatever leverage she has, she'll use it now, against you, against anyone who supported this. I know. Do you? He moved closer. Because exposing corruption is one thing. Surviving the retaliation is another. Thorne is dangerous when she has power. She's potentially deadly when she has nothing left to lose. Then I'll be careful. Careful won't be enough. Kael's expression was grave. I want security assigned to you, full-time protection. That's not necessary. It's not optional. Thorne has had weeks to position assets against you. The threats in your apartment were just the beginning. Leora blinked. How did you know about... You think I don't monitor potential security threats to my contracted queen? I've known about every message, every warning, every violation of your space. I've been tracking who had access, when, and through what means. And you didn't tell me? I was gathering evidence, building a case. waiting for Thorn to make a mistake. His gaze held hers. But now that she's exposed and cornered, the rules change. People who have nothing left to lose become unpredictable, dangerous. I can handle unpredictable. Can you handle assassination? The word landed like a stone. Leora set down her glass. You think she'd actually... I think she spent 15 years building power and protection. You just destroyed both in one council session. Yes, I think she'd kill you if she thought she could get away with it. Her mouth went dry. So what do I do? You accept the security. You don't go anywhere alone. You trust no one outside a very specific list of verified individuals. He pulled out a device, typed something, then handed it to her. These are the only people who have clearance to be near you unsupervised. Anyone else, you report immediately. Leora scanned the list. Ravik, Celine, 3 specific security personnel, and Kael himself. This is a very short list. That's intentional. The more people involved, the more opportunities for corruption. He took the device back. And Leora? If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you contact me immediately, day or night. I don't care if it seems paranoid. I care that you survive this. Something in his tone made her look up. Why? Why what? Why do you care? This started as a business arrangement, a contract. You're not just anything. The words came out rougher than she'd expected. You challenged a corrupt system. You risked everything to protect this territory's integrity. That makes you valuable to Blackridge. To Blackridge. To me. He said it quietly, almost reluctantly. You're valuable to me. The air between them shifted. Leora's heart hammered for entirely different reasons now. Kael? A knock interrupted. Ravik entered without waiting for acknowledgement. Your Majesty, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where half the council just received anonymous packages containing documentation of their past indiscretions, financial irregularities, personal scandals, strategic mistakes that could be reinterpreted as treason if someone were creative enough. Kael's expression went deadly. Thorn's leverage. Released all at once. A scorched earth strategy. Ravik looked grim. She's betting that facing exposure will make them turn on you. On Miss Hale. On anyone who supported the investigation. Will it work? Depends how many of them value their secrets more than their integrity. Ravik glanced at Leora. For what it's worth, my package just contained the war crimes documentation she's been holding. I expected worse. What are you going to do? Leora asked. Exactly what I should have done years ago. Release it myself. Let the tribunal proceedings happen. Face whatever consequences come. He smiled without humor. Thorn's greatest weapon was fear. Fear of exposure, fear of consequences. But once you stop being afraid, the weapon loses all its power. Kael nodded slowly. Issue a statement to the council. Anyone who wants to preempt Thorn's leverage by voluntarily disclosing their past mistakes has 24 hours. We'll handle each situation individually, with focus on moving forward rather than punishment. And those who don't disclose will be judged by both their past actions and their choice to hide them. Thorn's documentation becomes evidence of cover-up, not just original wrongdoing. Ravik grinned. You're turning her weapon against her. She taught me the strategy. I'm just executing it better. After Ravik left, Kael turned back to Leora. You should rest. Tomorrow will be... The explosion cut off his words. The blast came from somewhere in the eastern wing, a deep concussive boom that shook the entire structure. Alarm shrieked to life. Somewhere, glass shattered. Kael grabbed Leora's arm, pulling her toward the door. Move! Now! They ran through corridors filling with smoke and confusion. Security personnel rushed past. Courtiers stumbled from their rooms, faces white with shock. What happened? Leora gasped. I don't know, but we need to get you somewhere secure. They reached the central stairwell just as another explosion rocked the building. This one closer, somewhere below them. The structural integrity warning sirens activated. The building's compromised, Kael said grimly. We need to evacuate. They descended into organized chaos. People streaming toward exits, security trying to maintain order, smoke making everything hazy and difficult to breathe. Leora's eyes burned. Her lungs felt like they were being crushed. Then she saw it. A third device, tucked into the corner of the main entrance hall. Digital timer counting down. 45 seconds. Kael, he saw it at the same moment. Everyone out! Move! Now! Security started herding people towards secondary exits, but there were too many people, too many bodies trying to fit through doorways designed for controlled traffic, not panicked evacuation. They weren't going to make it. Leora's mind raced. The building's layout, the structural points, the blast radius of a device that size. 30 seconds. The water main, she said suddenly. The emergency suppression system. If we trigger it manually, it won't stop the explosion. No, but it might dampen the blast, reduce the thermal damage, buy people time to get clear. 20 seconds. Kael looked at the device, at the crowd, at her. The manual trigger is in the maintenance access, 2 floors down. I know where it is. You can't make it there and back in 20 seconds. I can make it there in 15. She ran before he could stop her, down the secondary stairs, through the maintenance corridor, her lungs screaming, her legs burning. 10 seconds. The manual trigger was exactly where the building schematics showed, a red lever behind an emergency access panel. She grabbed it, pulled with everything she had. Nothing. The lever was stuck, corroded. Probably hadn't been maintained in years because why would you maintain something you'd never expect to use? 5 seconds. Leora braced her foot against the wall and pulled with her entire body weight. The lever gave way. Water flooded the suppression system with a sound like dragons waking. 3 seconds. She threw herself behind the maintenance equipment. 2. 1. The explosion wasn't damped, it was redirected. The water from the suppression system hit the blast wave at the exact moment of detonation. Instead of expanding outward in a killing sphere, the force channeled upward through the weakest points, windows, ventilation shafts, anywhere the pressure could escape. The building shook like it was trying to tear itself apart. Leora felt the world go sideways. Pain. Ringing in her ears, darkness at the edges of her vision. Then hands were pulling her up. Kael's face, covered in soot, his eyes wild. Can you walk? I think, Don't think. Move. He half-carried, half-dragged her through corridors that were no longer structurally sound. Water poured from broken pipes. Debris blocked passages. The building groaned like a dying animal. They made it outside just as the eastern wing started to collapse. Leora fell to her knees on the grounds, gasping, her entire body shaking. Around them, others were doing the same. Council members, staff, security, all alive, all safe, because she'd bought them those crucial seconds. Kael knelt beside her. You insane, brilliant, absolutely reckless. Did it work? Everyone got out, nobody died. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. But you almost... If you'd been 5 seconds slower. But I wasn't. Emergency responders flooded the grounds. Medical personnel started triaging. Someone wrapped a thermal blanket around Leora's shoulders. Through the chaos, she saw Ravik approaching, his expression grave. Preliminary assessment, he said to Kael. 3 devices. Professional grade. Planted in structural weak points calculated to bring down the entire administrative wing. If they'd all detonated as planned... How many casualties? Kael asked quietly. Potentially hundreds. The blast patterns were designed for maximum fatalities. Leora's stomach turned. Thorn. We don't have proof yet. Who else has the motivation and resources? She struggled to her feet despite Kael's protest. She knew exactly when the building would be most populated. She knew the structural vulnerabilities. She planned this to kill everyone who supported her investigation. If that's true, Ravik said carefully, then Thorn just escalated from corruption to terrorism, from embezzlement to mass murder. Where is she? Kael's voice was winter-made lethal. Her residence is empty. She fled sometime after the council suspension, current location unknown. Kael stood, his expression promising violence. Find her. I don't care what it takes. Find her and bring her to me. Ravik nodded and left. Medics approached, trying to check Leora for injuries, but she waved them off. I'm fine. Check the others first. Miss Hale, you have debris lacerations and possible concussion. Later. She scanned the crowd. So many faces she recognized. People who'd survived because she'd made one insane decision in a handful of seconds. Master Chen, his normally precise demeanor shattered into shocked relief. The younger council members, some of them crying, staff members clutching each other, all alive, all safe. For now. Celine appeared through the smoke, her usually perfect composure cracked into something approaching human emotion. Miss Hale, that was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. I'm hearing that a lot tonight. It's accurate both ways. Celine's voice softened. But thank you. Without your action, don't thank me yet. Thorn's still out there. Not for long. Celine's expression hardened. Word of the bombing is spreading. Every territory in the region will be looking for her. There's nowhere she can hide. Desperate people don't hide, Leora said. They strike back. The temporary command center was established in the Western Wing, the only section of the administrative complex still structurally sound. KL convened an emergency session with Ravik and key security personnel while medics finally cornered Leora and forced her to accept treatment. She sat on a medical cot, wincing as they cleaned debris from her shoulder, and watched through the doorway as Kael coordinated the response. He moved with absolute focus, issuing orders, processing reports, his control absolute even in crisis. But she'd seen the look in his eyes when he'd pulled her from the maintenance corridor. That hadn't been a king concerned about a contract asset. That had been a man terrified of losing someone who mattered. Hold still, the medic said, applying something that stung like concentrated fire. Leora gritted her teeth and tried not to think about how close she'd come to dying, about the timer counting down, about the decision to run toward danger instead of away from it, about how it had felt exactly right. The medic finished and moved on to the next patient. Leora stood carefully, testing her balance. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. She walked to the command center doorway just as Ravik said something that made Kael's expression go deadly. What happened? She asked. Kael turned and she saw controlled fury in his eyes. Thorn's been in contact with the Shadowlands. Leora's blood went cold. The Shadowlands were the territories beyond Blackridge's borders, lawless regions where criminals, mercenaries, and worse found refuge, places where order didn't exist and violence was currency. In contact how? She asked. Offering information, Ravik said grimly. Territorial secrets, strategic vulnerabilities, security protocols, everything she knows about Blackridge in exchange for asylum and protection. That's treason. That's survival, Kael corrected. She knows she can't stay in any legitimate territory, so she's trading what she knows for protection in places beyond our jurisdiction. Can we stop her? Not legally. The Shadowlands don't honor extradition treaties. His hands curled into fists. She'll live there in exile, protected by people who'd love to use Blackridge's secrets against us. And there's nothing I can do about it. Leora's mind raced. What if there was? Both men looked at her. What if someone went into the Shadowlands and brought her back? She continued. Impossible, Ravik said. The Shadowlands are beyond our jurisdiction. I know. But also beyond our enemy's jurisdiction. Neutral ground where the usual rules don't apply. Kael's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting an extraction. I'm suggesting we can't let someone who just tried to commit mass murder escape justice because she ran to a lawless territory. Not when she has information that could destroy Blackridge. An extraction operation in the Shadowlands would be suicide, even with military force. Not military force, Leora interrupted. Military force would be noticed, would start a conflict, but one person? Someone Thorn doesn't know to fear? Someone who could get close enough to… No. Kael's voice was absolute. Absolutely not. It's the only way. Then we find another way. You're not going into the Shadowlands. You're not going anywhere near Thorn. You're staying here where I can protect you. Protect me? Leora's voice rose. Kael, she just tried to blow up half your council. She's going to sell every security secret you have to people who'd love to see Blackridge fall. Protecting me doesn't matter if the entire territory collapses because we let her escape. I said no. And I'm saying you don't get to make that choice for me. Silence crashed between them. Ravik cleared his throat. I'll give you two a moment. He left. Kael moved toward her, his expression dangerous. You don't understand what you're suggesting. The Shadowlands aren't just lawless, They're actively hostile to anyone from legitimate territories. They'd kill you for sport, and Thorn would see you coming from miles away. Unless she thought I was running to her. What? Leora took a breath. Thorn knows you suspended her, knows you supported the investigation, but she also knows I'm the one who exposed her corruption. What if I contacted her, claimed the council turned on me after the bombing, that I'm being blamed for not preventing it, that I need asylum? She'd never believe she'd want to believe, because having me under her control would be the ultimate revenge. She could parade me in front of whoever's protecting her, prove that even Blackridge's contract queen chose exile over serving you. Kale stared at her. You're serious? Completely. This is insane. Even if she believed you, which she won't, you'd be walking into a territory where murder is entertainment and trust doesn't exist, where every person you meet would kill you for pocket change. I've survived worse. No, you haven't. Nothing in your life prepared you for the Shadowlands. Nothing in my life prepared me for Blackridge either. But I'm still here. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip just short of painful. I can't lose you. But the words hung between them. Leora's breath caught. Kael, I know what this started as. A contract. A business arrangement. Mutually beneficial terms with no emotional entanglement. But somewhere between your chaotic solutions and your insane courage and your absolute refusal to be what anyone expects, he stopped, jaw tight. I can't lose you. So the answer is no. Find another way. Leora reached up, her hands covering his. What if there isn't another way? Then we accept the consequences. We shore up our defenses. We prepare for whatever Thorn tells the Shadowlands, but we do it together, here, where you're safe. Safe isn't the same as right. I don't care about right. I care about keeping you alive. And I care about protecting the territory you built. The people who live here. The future we could have if we're not constantly defending against threats from exiled traitors. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his heartbeat, close enough to see the war in his eyes between control and something far more dangerous. Let me do this, she said softly. Let me fix what my investigation started. Your investigation saved Blackridge from systematic corruption and created an enemy with nothing to lose and everything to reveal. I need to finish this. By risking your life? By doing what's necessary. Kale's hands tightened on her shoulders. If I let you do this, if I agree to this insane suicidal plan, you follow every protocol, every safety measure, every extraction contingency. You don't improvise, you don't deviate. You do exactly what the plan requires, and nothing more. Since when do I follow rules? Since the alternative is dying in a place where no one will even recover your body. His voice cracked. Please, Leora. If you're going to risk everything, at least do it carefully. She saw it then. Not the controlled king, not the perfect alpha who valued order above all. Just a man terrified of losing someone he couldn't afford to care about. Someone he cared about anyway. I'll be careful, she promised. I'll follow the plan. I'll come back. You better. He released her shoulders but didn't step back. Because if you die in the Shadowlands, I'm going to follow you there just to kill you myself for being so reckless. That's romantic in a very disturbing way. That's the best you're getting from someone who's spent decades learning not to feel anything. She smiled despite everything. I'll take it. Behind them, Ravik cleared his throat again. If you two are finished having a moment, we should probably discuss the actual logistics of this suicide mission. Kael stepped back, his expression shifting into command mode. 24 hours. We plan every detail, account for every variable, and if at any point this looks unworkable, we abort. Agreed? Leora nodded. But as they moved toward the planning table, as Ravik started pulling up maps of the Shadowlands territories, as the scope of what she'd just volunteered for became clear, she wondered if agreeing to be careful was a promise she could actually keep, because the Shadowlands didn't care about promises, and Thorn certainly didn't care about mercy. In 24 hours, Leora would walk into the most dangerous territory in the region, alone, armed with nothing but a fabricated story and desperate hope. And the only thing standing between her and death would be her ability to convince a woman who wanted her destroyed that they were now allies. The planning session stretched into the early morning hours. Maps covered every surface. Contingency plans stacked like evidence. Communication protocols were established. then revised again. Through it all, Kyle remained rigidly controlled. But Lyora caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, memorizing her face like he expected it to be the last time. Maybe it would be. As dawn broke over Blackridge's damaged skyline, Lyora stood at the window and watched light reveal the full extent of the destruction. The eastern wing was a skeleton. Windows shattered throughout the complex. Smoke still rising from interior fires, and somewhere beyond the borders, Thorn was waiting. "Ready?" Ravik asked. Lyora turned. The entire extraction team stood assembled, not to go with her, but to brief her one final time. Communication devices disguised as jewelry, emergency extraction coordinates, codes that would trigger immediate military response if everything went catastrophically wrong. "Remember," Kyle said, his voice carrying no trace of the emotion from hours before. "You're a contract queen who failed, who's being blamed for not preventing the bombing, who's desperate and angry and looking for revenge against the king who's turning on you. You make Thorn believe that story, you get close, and the moment you have an opening, I signal for extraction and your team moves in. Exactly. And if I can't signal? Then we come anyway, 72 hours maximum. After that, we extract you by force whether you're ready or not." 72 hours in the Shadowlands. 3 days to find Thorn, gain her trust, and survive long enough for rescue. Lyora swallowed. "Piece of cake." Nobody smiled. Celine approached with a travel case, deliberately worn, suggesting someone leaving in desperate hurry. "Everything you'll need, enough currency for initial bribes, documents that support your cover story, personal items that look like you grabbed them in panic. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you come back alive." The team dispersed to final preparations. Kyle remained. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly, "about not being able to lose you." "I know. Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because I need you to understand something. When you come back, and you will come back, we're renegotiating this contract." "What?" "No more pretending this is purely professional. No more acting like I don't care whether you live or die. No more—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I've spent my entire life building control, building order, building walls between myself and anything that might make me feel. You walked into Blackridge and destroyed every single one of those walls." Lyora's heart hammered. "Kyle, when you come back," he repeated, "we're doing this differently. No contracts, no terms, just us. Whatever that means, whatever it becomes, but real. And if I don't come back, then I'm coming after you, and neither Thorn nor the entire Shadowlands will stop me." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and nothing like the controlled king who valued efficiency above emotion. When he pulled back, his eyes were storm gray and absolutely serious. "Come back to me." "I will. Promise me." "I promise." The transport vehicle arrived. Lyora gathered her case, took one last look at the damaged building that had become home, and walked toward the vehicle. Toward the border. Toward the Shadowlands. Toward the most dangerous gamble of her life. The driver, one of Ravik's most trusted operatives, said nothing as they drove through territories becoming progressively less controlled. Order gave way to chaos. Structure crumbled into lawlessness. By the time they reached the border, civilization felt like a memory. "This is as far as I go," the driver said. "Beyond this point, you're on your own until extraction." "I understand. Miss Hale," he handed her a small device. "Personal gift from Lord Ravik, emergency beacon. If things go completely sideways, you activate this, and we come running, no questions asked." She tucked it into her jacket. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive." She stepped out of the vehicle. The Shadowlands stretched before her, a territory where rules didn't exist and mercy was a foreign language, where somewhere in the darkness, Thorn was waiting. Lyora took a breath, shouldered her case, and walked across the border, into chaos, into danger, into the unknown. Behind her, the last sight of legitimate civilization disappeared. Ahead, only darkness and the desperate hope that her gamble would pay off, that she'd find Thorn, that she'd survive long enough to signal extraction, that she'd make it back to the man she'd just promised to return to. The night swallowed her whole. And in the distance, something laughed. The laughter came from a tavern that looked like it had been built from the bones of better buildings. Leora pushed through the door into a wall of smoke, sweat, and barely controlled violence. The interior was packed with exactly the kind of people who chose to live beyond civilization's reach: scarred mercenaries, exiled criminals, refugees from territories that had collapsed into war. Every eye turned when she entered. She felt the weight of their assessment like physical touch, looking for weapons, for weakness, for any sign she was worth robbing, or worse. Leora kept her expression carefully neutral, not afraid, not aggressive, just exhausted. A woman who'd run out of options and landed here because she had nowhere else to go. "Looking for someone," she said to the room at large. "Morgana Thorn, Blackridge exile. I heard she's taking refuge somewhere in the Shadowlands." Silence stretched. Then a man with more scars than face laughed. "You got some balls walking in here asking about Thorn. You know what happened to the last person who came looking for her?" "I don't care what happened to them. I care about finding her." "Why?" A woman at the bar turned, sharp features, sharper eyes. "Thorn's got protection now, powerful protection. You come at her, you come at all of us." "I'm not coming at her, I'm coming to join her." That got attention. The woman stood, circling Leora like a predator evaluating prey. "You're Blackridge. I can smell the order on you from here. What's someone from Kael Varen's perfect little kingdom doing in the Shadowlands?" Surviving, Leora met her gaze without flinching. "Varen turned on me, blamed me for not preventing Thorn's bombing. I'm done serving kings who throw people away the second they're inconvenient." "Convenient story? How do we know you're not a spy?" "Because if I was a spy, I'd have a better cover story than the king I served decided I was expendable. If I was smart, I'd have stayed in Blackridge and played the victim. Instead, I'm here, looking for the one person who knows exactly what it's like to be betrayed by Kael Varen's version of justice." The woman studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "Name's Kira. You want to see Thorn? You go through me first. And trust me, sweetheart, I'm a lot harder to convince than she is." The interrogation lasted 3 hours. Kira questioned every detail of Leora's story: how she'd gotten out of Blackridge, why she thought Thorn would help her, what she knew about territorial security that might be valuable. Leora wove truth and lies together until they were indistinguishable. The bombing was real. The council's investigation was real. Her exposure of Thorn's corruption was real. The betrayal? That was the lie that had to land. "Varen used me," Leora said, letting exhaustion and anger bleed into her voice. "Made me think he valued my insights, my challenges to the system." But the second things got dangerous, the second the bombing happened and people started questioning how I didn't see it coming, he threw me to the council like garbage, said I was a liability, said my chaotic methods compromised security. And you believed him? I believed the security detail that showed up to escort me to a safe location that looked a lot like a detention cell. I believed the contract termination notice. I believed the fact that he didn't even have the decency to tell me himself, just sent his administrator with paperwork and armed guards. Kira leaned back. "So you ran?" "I survived. There's a difference." "And now you want what? Revenge?" "I want to stop being someone's discarded tool. Thorn knows what that feels like. She knows how Varen operates. Build people up, use them, destroy them the moment they're inconvenient. I figure we have common ground. Common ground doesn't mean trust. Trust is earned. I'm willing to earn it." Leora met Kira's gaze. "I'm also willing to offer something Thorn might find valuable." "Like what?" "Like current security protocols, updated council schedules, information about new defensive measures Varen's implementing post-bombing." She paused. "Information that expires the longer I sit here being interrogated instead of talking to the person who can actually use it." Kira smiled slowly. "You've got spine. I'll give you that." She stood. "Come on. Thorn's going to want to meet you herself." They traveled through territory that made the tavern look civilized. No roads, just paths worn by people who didn't care about infrastructure. Buildings constructed from salvaged materials, metal sheeting, scavenged wood, whatever could be stolen or scavenged. The Shadowlands didn't build. They consumed. Rules here are simple, Kira said as they walked. Don't steal from anyone stronger than you. Don't start fights you can't finish. Don't trust anyone completely, and never, ever show weakness. Weakness gets you killed. Sounds delightful. It's honest. No pretending. No fake civility. You want something, you take it. You're strong, you survive. You're weak, you don't. At least it's clear. Clear isn't the same as good. Didn't say it was good, said it was honest. Kira glanced at her. You'll figure that out, assuming you survive long enough. They approached what looked like a fortified compound, walls made of shipping containers welded together, guards posted at intervals, defensive positions that suggested someone had military training. Thorns in there? Leora asked. Under protection of Victor Cross, he runs this sector, provides security for high-value exiles in exchange for whatever they can offer. Thorn's offering plenty. Blackridge secrets. And then some. Victor's building quite the intelligence operation. Your former queen is his star asset. Kira stopped at the gate. Last chance to back out. Once you go in there, Victor owns you until he decides otherwise. That's the price of protection in the Shadowlands. Leora thought of the emergency beacon in her jacket, the extraction team waiting for her signal, Kael's last words. Come back to me. I'm not backing out. Didn't think so. You got that same look Thorn had when she first arrived. Desperation dressed up as determination. Kira signaled to the guards. But fair warning, desperation makes you dangerous. And dangerous people either become powerful here, or they become examples. The gates opened. Inside, the compound was surprisingly organized. Barracks, storage facilities, what looked like a command center. People moved with purpose. This wasn't random chaos. This was controlled operation. Victor Cross met them in what passed for an administrative building. He was massive, not just tall, but built like violence had shaped him into a weapon. Scars mapped his visible skin. His eyes held the kind of cold that came from seeing every worst thing humanity could do and deciding to do them better. So, he said, voice like gravel, you're the contract queen who got stupid enough to cross Kael Varen. I'm the contract queen who got smart enough to leave before he killed me for it. Victor smiled. Thorn said you'd be arrogant, said you thought you were clever, said watching you crawl here desperate would be the best revenge she could ask for. Is she here? Oh, she's here. Been waiting for you, actually. Had bets on how long it would take before you showed up begging for sanctuary. He moved closer. Question is whether you're actually desperate or whether you're playing a deeper game. Leora's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice level. What game would I be playing? I lost everything. My contract, my position, my safety. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. Maybe. Or maybe Varen sent you to infiltrate. To get close to Thorn and bring her back for trial. To recover his precious territorial secrets before they spread too far. If Varen wanted me to infiltrate, he would have trained me better than to walk in here with a story this transparent. Victor studied her. Strip. Excuse me. You heard me. Strip. Completely. I want to make sure you're not carrying any listening devices, tracking beacons, or other gifts from your former employer. Leora's mind raced. The emergency beacon was hidden in her jacket lining, designed to look like a fastener. But if Victor's people did a thorough search... Problem? Victor asked. Just wondering if this is standard procedure or if you just like making women uncomfortable. Both. Now strip, or I assume you're hiding something worth killing you over. No choice. Leora removed her jacket carefully, then the rest of her clothing, trying to position everything so the beacon stayed hidden in the jacket's internal pocket. Victor's people searched her thoroughly, invasive, humiliating, exactly the kind of power play designed to break someone's dignity. They found nothing. Because they weren't looking for a hidden beacon. They were looking for obvious tech. And Ravik had designed the beacon to be invisible unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Clean, one of the guards reported. Clothes too, Victor ordered. They searched every piece, turned pockets inside out, checked seams. Leora held her breath. The guard's fingers brushed over the beacon, disguised as a reinforced fastener, and moved on. Nothing, he confirmed. Victor nodded. Get dressed. Leora pulled her clothes back on with hands that wanted to shake but didn't dare. You're either clean Or you're better than I gave you credit for, Victor said. Either way, Thorn wants to see you. And what Thorn wants, Thorn gets. She's paying too well for me to deny her entertainment. They found Thorn in what looked like a private suite, by Shadowland standards, which meant it had actual walls and furniture that hadn't been salvaged from a dump. She looked different than Leora remembered, less polished, hair showing gray roots she'd previously dyed, clothes practical rather than expensive, but her eyes held the same cold calculation. Well, well, Thorn said, setting down her drink. The contract queen herself. How the mighty have fallen. Hello, Lady Thorn. It's just Thorn now. No titles in the Shadowlands, no pretense, just survival and opportunity. She circled Leora like a predator. Kira tells me you're looking for refuge, that Varen turned on you, that you want revenge. I want to stop being someone's disposable tool. Noble sentiment, terrible strategy. Thorn smiled. Revenge requires power. What power do you have here? You're an exile in a territory that eats people like you for breakfast. I have information. Current security protocols, council schedules, defensive measures. Varen's implementing, which expire the moment you share them. Then what? What value do you have after you've sold everything you know? Leora had prepared for this. I have access to ongoing intelligence, contacts still inside Blackridge who don't know I've been exiled, people who trust me, people who'll keep feeding me information because they think I'm still on their side. It was complete fabrication, but it was the kind of fabrication that had to work. Thorn's eyes narrowed. Names. After I know I'm safe, after I know you're not just going to use me and throw me away like Varen did, I'm done being someone's temporary asset. Smart. Paranoid, but smart. Thorn poured 2 drinks, handed one to Leora. Here's my problem. I want to believe you. I want to believe that Varen turned on you the same way he turned on me, that you're genuinely desperate and angry and looking for payback. But I've spent 15 years learning that everyone lies when they're desperate, so convince me. Tell me something that proves you're not Varen's spy. Leora took a breath. This was the moment, the gamble everything rested on. The bombing, she said quietly. You planted 3 devices, professional grade, designed to bring down the Eastern Wing during peak population. But you made one mistake. Thorn went very still. What mistake? You assumed the suppression system wasn't maintained, that it wouldn't activate, that the water damage would be minimal. Leora met her gaze. I'm the one who triggered it manually. I'm the reason your bombs didn't kill hundreds of people. I'm the reason the blast was redirected instead of expanding outward. Silence stretched like broken glass. You're the one, Thorn said slowly, who ruined my revenge. I'm the one who saved people who later blamed me for not preventing the bombing entirely, who said I should have known, should have anticipated, should have stopped it before it started. Leora's voice hardened. I saved their lives, and they repaid me by questioning my loyalty, by investigating whether I was somehow complicit, by making me the scapegoat for your terrorism. So you do blame me. I blame Varen for creating a system so rigid that the only way to challenge it was through violence. I blame the council for being so corrupt that exposure meant attempted mass murder. I blame everyone who built Blackridge into something that destroys anyone who doesn't fit perfectly into its ordered little boxes. She paused. But mostly, I blame myself for thinking I could change it from the inside. Thorn studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, genuine, almost warm. You really did lose everything, didn't you? Everything that mattered. Good. Thorn raised her glass. Then you're exactly where I was 3 weeks ago. Angry, betrayed, ready to watch Blackridge burn. Welcome to the Shadowlands, Leora. I think we're going to do terrible things together. They drank. And Leora felt the first piece of her gamble click into place. The days that followed were a careful dance. Thorn kept her close but watched constantly, testing, probing for inconsistencies in her story, looking for any sign she was more than she claimed. Leora played the role carefully, bitter but not vengeful, angry but not irrational, desperate but not broken. A woman who'd lost everything and was figuring out how to build something new from the ashes. She shared carefully selected information about Blackridge security, real enough to be valuable, vague enough to avoid giving away anything critical. Varen's implementing rotating patrol patterns, she told Thorne during one of their evening conversations, changing them weekly to prevent predictability. He's also adding redundant communication systems in case the primary network is compromised. All because I blew up one building, Thorne smiled. He's more paranoid than I thought. He's more scared than he'd ever admit, scared that other people will realize Blackridge isn't as impregnable as it looks, that order can be disrupted, that his perfect control is just an illusion, one explosion away from shattering. Is that what you think? That his control is an illusion? Leora chose her words carefully. I think he's built something impressive, but he's built it on the assumption that everyone follows the same rules, the same logic. And the moment someone operates outside that framework, someone like you, someone like me, the whole system becomes vulnerable. Thorne leaned forward. So how do we exploit that vulnerability? We don't rush. We gather intelligence. We find the weak points. We wait for the perfect moment to strike when it'll do maximum damage. And you know those weak points? I know some. I can figure out others, given time and resources. Time we have. Resources. Thorne gestured to Victor's compound. Less abundant. Victor's protection isn't free. He wants intelligence he can sell to other territories. He wants leverage he can use to expand his power. We're valuable to him only as long as we're producing. Then we produce. We give him enough to stay valuable, but not enough to be expendable. Thorne smiled. You're learning. The Shadowlands teaches quickly. Adapt or die, provide value or be discarded. It's honest in a way Blackridge never was. Blackridge has rules. Blackridge has the illusion of rules, but underneath, it's just as brutal, just more polite about it. She poured more drinks. At least here, when someone wants you dead, they try to kill you. They don't hide it behind protocol and procedure and proper channels. Leora thought of Kael, of his warnings, of the way he'd kissed her before she left, desperate and fierce and completely opposed to everything Thorne was saying. But she couldn't defend him, not now, not when her cover depended on bitterness. You're right, she said quietly. At least here it's honest. On the 5th day, Victor summoned them both to the command center. Maps covered the walls. Territorial boundaries, trade routes, military installations. Victor's operation wasn't just about providing refuge. He was building intelligence networks that spanned the entire region. Your information checks out, he said to Leora. Verified through independent sources. Varen is implementing exactly the security changes you described. I told you I had current intelligence. You also told Thorne you have ongoing contacts inside Blackridge. I want names. Leora's pulse spiked. I told Thorne I'd provide names when I knew I was safe. You're as safe as you're valuable. Right now your value is theoretical. Names make it concrete. And if I give you names, you'll burn those sources by contacting them directly. Then I'll have no ongoing intelligence and no value. Smart and paranoid, Victor smiled. I like that. Means you might actually survive here. But it also means I need more than promises. I need proof you can deliver ongoing value. Not just what you know now, but what you can access moving forward. Thorne spoke up. What did you have in mind? Test run. Small scale. Victor pulled up a specific map section. Blackridge maintains a secure communication relay station at the northern border. Remote location. Minimal staff. If someone could access it and pull current encryption protocols, that information would be worth substantial protection. You want us to infiltrate a Blackridge facility, Leora said. I want you to prove you can. Thorne's already proven her commitment by sharing everything she knows. You? You're still an unknown quantity. Prove you're willing to act against Varen, and we talk about long-term arrangements. Prove you're just talk, and... He shrugged. The Shadowlands has plenty of mass graves for people who don't deliver. Leora's mind raced. An actual infiltration mission against Blackridge. If she went, she'd be actively sabotaging the territory she was supposed to be helping. If she refused, Victor would assume she was a spy. When? She asked. Tomorrow night. Small team. In and out before anyone notices. Thorne goes to verify you don't sabotage the mission. You go to prove your commitment is real. No choice. The trap was closing. I'm in, Leora said. Victor smiled. Excellent. Fail, and you're both dead. Succeed, and we discuss making this arrangement permanent. That night, Alone in the small room she'd been assigned, Leora pulled out the emergency beacon. One press would signal extraction. Ravik's team would come in force. They'd pull her out, probably start a firefight, definitely blow her cover completely. But she'd be safe. She'd also fail the mission. Leave Thorn in the Shadowlands with all of Blackridge's secrets. Return empty-handed with nothing to show for the risk. Kyle's voice echoed in her memory. 72 hours maximum. After that, we extract you by force whether you're ready or not. She'd been here 6 days. They were already past deadline. Already planning forced extraction. If she signaled now, she could end this. Go home. Live. Leora stared at the beacon. Then she put it back in her jacket and started planning how to infiltrate a Blackridge facility without actually compromising critical security. Because going home empty-handed wasn't survival. It was just another kind of failure. The infiltration team assembled at midnight. Leora, Thorn, Kira, and 3 of Victor's best operatives, all of them looking at Leora like they expected her to either betray them or get them killed. Simple plan, Kira said, reviewing the approach route. We come in from the blind side, disable external sensors, access the relay station through the maintenance entrance, pull the encryption protocols, exit before anyone notices. And if someone notices, one of the operatives asked, we kill them and run faster. Lovely plan. You got a better one, share it, otherwise shut up and move. They traveled through darkness to the border region, that liminal space between Shadowlands chaos and Blackridge order. The relay station sat on a hill like a small fortress, its security lights cutting through the night. 2 guards visible, Kira observed through tactical binoculars. Probably 2 more inside. Standard patrol pattern every 15 minutes. We've got a narrow window. Leora studied the facility and felt something twist in her chest. This was Blackridge, her territory, the place she'd fought to protect, and she was about to help rob it. Problem? Thorn asked quietly. No problem, just planning the approach. Planning or regretting? Can't it be both? Thorn smiled. Yes, but regret gets you killed. Save it for after we're successful. They moved in during the patrol gap. Silent, professional, exactly the kind of precision operation Blackridge would have been proud of if it wasn't being used against them. Kira disabled the sensors with equipment that suggested Victor had serious technical resources. The maintenance entrance opened with codes that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside Blackridge security. Inside, the relay station hummed with the sound of communications equipment routing encrypted messages across the territory. Encryption protocols are in the main server room, one of the operatives whispered. 2 floors up. We've got maybe 5 minutes before the next patrol check. They climbed stairs designed for efficiency, not stealth. Every footstep echoed. Leora's heart hammered. This was wrong. Every instinct screamed to abort, to signal for help, to... There, Kira said, gesturing to the server room door. It was locked. Keycard access only. Can you bypass it? Thorn asked. Not without triggering alarms. Kira looked at Leora. Unless your contacts inside Blackridge included access codes? All eyes turned to her. This was it, the moment of truth. Leora could claim she didn't have codes. The mission would fail. Victor would assume she was useless or a spy. Both options ended with her dead, or she could provide actual access. Prove her betrayal was real. Cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She thought of Kyle, of his trust, of the promise she'd made to come back. She thought of the extraction team waiting for her signal. She thought of Blackridge and everything it represented, order and control and the future she'd been fighting to protect. Then she thought of something else. I have codes, she said, but they're old. From before my exile, they might not work anymore. Try them. Leora approached the keypad. Her hands shook. She entered a code. Not the real one, but close enough to look legitimate. A sequence that would trigger a silent alarm without obvious rejection. The lock clicked green. The door opened. Lucky, Kira breathed. They haven't rotated codes yet. They hadn't, because the alarm Leora had just triggered was already alerting Blackridge security that someone had accessed this facility with compromised credentials. Help was coming. She just had to survive until it arrived. Inside the server room, the operatives went to work extracting encryption protocols. Fast, professional, clearly having done this before. Thorn watched Leora carefully. You're quiet. I'm thinking. About? About how strange it is to be on this side of security. How different everything looks when you're the one breaking the rules instead of enforcing them. Feeling guilty? Feeling realistic. Once we do this, there's no going back. Varen will know I helped steal these protocols. Any chance of reconciliation dies here. You want reconciliation? Thorn's voice was sharp. After everything he did to you? No, but crossing this line means accepting I'm never going home, never being anything except an exile in the Shadowlands. I'm just acknowledging the weight of that choice. Thorn studied her, then nodded. Good. Means you're not stupid. Stupid people don't survive here. Got it, one of the operatives announced. Encryption protocols downloaded. We're done. Then let's move before... Alarms shrieked to life. Red lights flooded the facility. Automated lockdown procedures activated. Doors sealed with the sound of steel grinding against steel. Shit, Kira swore. They detected the access. We're locked in. Not possible, the operative protested. I bypassed all the security. Someone triggered an alarm, Thorn said, her gaze locking on Leora. Someone who knew exactly which code would alert security without obvious rejection. Leora backed toward the door. I used the codes I had. You used codes designed to trap us. Thorn's hand moved to her weapon. You're still working for Varen. This whole thing was a setup. If I was working for Varen, I would have signaled for extraction days ago instead of walking into this facility with you. Unless the facility was the target all along. Unless you needed us here, locked in, waiting for Blackridge security to arrive and capture us all. Kira raised her weapon. Is that true? Are you a spy? I'm someone trying to survive in impossible circumstances. That's not an answer. Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles. Blackridge security was moving fast. We're surrounded, one of the operatives reported from the window. Multiple units. We can't fight our way out. Thorn's weapon was steady on Leora's chest. You betrayed us. After everything. After I believed you. I didn't betray anyone. I triggered that alarm to buy time. For what? For your extraction team to arrive? For Varen's forces to capture everyone here and drag us back for trial? The building shook with the impact of breaching charges. Blackridge security was coming in hard and fast. Leora had maybe 30 seconds before everything collapsed. She pulled out the emergency beacon, held it up where everyone could see. This, she said, is my extraction signal. One press and my people come running. One press and I'm safe, you're captured, and this whole thing ends with me going home. Thorn's finger moved to the trigger. Then press it, save yourself, prove you were always just Varen's spy playing a deep game. I'm not pressing it, because I'm not his spy, because I didn't come here to betray you. I came here to bring you back for justice. Real justice, not revenge. Trial, not execution. Accountability for trying to murder hundreds of people, not exile in the Shadowlands selling secrets to the highest bidder. So you admit it. You're working for Blackridge. I'm working to protect the territory from people who destroy it, including you. Leora's voice hardened. You tried to commit mass murder. You fled to the Shadowlands. You're selling territorial secrets to Victor Cross so he can use them against everyone in the region. You're not a victim, Thorn. You're a terrorist, and I'm done pretending otherwise. The door exploded inward. Blackridge security flooded the room, fast, armed, professional. Not Kyle's people. Not the extraction team Leora expected. Victor's forces. They'd been monitoring the facility, waiting for exactly this moment. Well, Victor said, stepping through the smoke. This is interesting. Contract Queen reveals herself as Blackridge spy. Former administrator reveals she's been played. My team captures both. Everyone loses except me. He smiled at Leora. Did you really think I didn't know what you were? I've been running intelligence operations for 15 years. I can spot a spy from miles away. But I let you play your game because watching Thorn trust you was entertaining. And because having both of you here together creates a very specific opportunity. What opportunity? Thorn demanded. Leverage. Blackridge wants you back for trial. Wants her back for whatever mission she was actually running. I have both of you, which means I can auction you to the highest bidder, or use you to extract concessions from Varen himself. He gestured to his forces. Secure them both. We're going to send a message to Blackridge's king, and if he wants his people back, he's going to pay everything I ask. Leora's hand tightened on the emergency beacon. One press. Extraction team comes running. Firefight erupts. People die. Mission fails. But she'd be alive. She looked at Thorn, the woman who'd tried to murder hundreds of people and showed no remorse. She looked at Victor, a predator who'd used them both as currency in his power games. She looked at the beacon and made a choice that would either save everything or destroy it completely. She pressed the button, then threw the beacon directly at Victor's face. "Now!" she screamed. The room exploded into chaos. The beacon hit Victor square in the face, and in the half-second of his shock, Leora moved. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a tactical baton from Victor's belt, and swung it hard into the knee of the guard closest to her. He went down with a scream. She kept moving, diving behind server equipment as gunfire erupted, but the shots weren't coming from Victor's people. They were coming from outside. The windows exploded inward in a cascade of glass and smoke grenades. Blackridge extraction teams dropped through on rappel lines, 6 operators in full tactical gear, moving with the kind of precision that made Victor's people look like amateurs. "Leora Hale, get down!" someone shouted. She hit the floor. The room became a war zone. Victor's forces tried to establish defensive positions, but Blackridge operators moved like they'd practiced this exact scenario 1,000 times. Suppressing fire, tactical advancement, room clearing that was textbook perfect. Thorn scrambled for cover, her face white with shock. "This is impossible. How did they know?" "Because I told them," Leora said, crawling toward her. "The moment I triggered that alarm, the moment I accessed this facility with compromised codes, every move I made tonight was designed to bring them here. You played everyone. I survived everyone. There's a difference." A Blackridge operator appeared above them, Lord Ravik himself, because of course he'd lead his own extraction operation. "Miss Hale, you're supposed to be in the Shadowlands." "I was. Then I decided to bring the Shadowlands to you instead." She gestured to Thorn. "Package secured. Can we leave before Victor calls reinforcements?" "Already incoming. We've got maybe 3 minutes." Ravik spoke into his comm. "Target acquired. Initiating extraction protocol Alpha 7. More operators flooded the room. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, overwhelming resistance, securing objectives with brutal efficiency. Victor tried to run, made it exactly 4 steps before a Blackridge operator tackled him so hard the impact cracked floor tiles. "Victor Cross," Ravik said, approaching the downed crime lord. "You're under arrest for harboring fugitives, trafficking in stolen intelligence, and operating illegal military installations on sovereign territory. You have the right to absolutely nothing because the Shadowlands don't have jurisdiction and you just became Blackridge's problem." Victor spit blood. "You can't arrest me. I'm beyond your laws. We're beyond our laws. Past tense. The moment you took Blackridge citizens hostage, you became subject to our justice." Ravik smiled without humor. "Welcome to order, you son of a bitch." The extraction team secured both Thorn and Victor with restraints designed for hostile prisoners. Kira and the other operatives were rounded up, disarmed, processed with mechanical efficiency. "Move," Ravik ordered. "We've got incoming hostiles from the Shadowlands. 3 minutes to extraction point." They ran. Through corridors filling with smoke, out emergency exits, across terrain that became a firefight as Victor's reinforcements arrived. Too late to prevent the extraction, early enough to make leaving dangerous. Leora ran alongside Blackridge operators who moved around her like protective armor. Someone handed her a tactical vest. Someone else shoved a weapon into her hands. "Can you shoot?" the operator asked. "Not well." "Then don't. Just run and don't die." Solid advice. They reached the extraction vehicles, armored transports that looked like they could survive artillery strikes. Leora was shoved inside next to Thorn, who looked like her entire worldview had just shattered. "You were never exiled," Thorn said quietly. "Varen never turned on you. This whole thing, the desperate contract queen, the betrayal, the need for revenge, all of it was a lie." "Not all of it," Leora said as the vehicle lurched into motion. "The part about being desperate was true. The part about needing to stop you from selling Blackridge secrets was true. I just improvised the methodology. You risked everything on a gamble. I risked everything on controlled chaos. And it worked." Thorn laughed, bitter, broken. You're more like me than you want to admit. We both saw a system we thought was corrupt. We both tried to destroy it. The only difference is you had Varen's protection, and I didn't. The difference is I tried to fix the system from inside. You tried to murder everyone in it. Same goal, different methods. No, different goals entirely. You wanted revenge. I wanted justice. The transport punched through the border into Black Ridge territory. Behind them, the Shadowlands receded into darkness, lawless, chaotic, exactly the kind of place that spawned people like Victor. Ahead, Black Ridge rose in geometric precision. Order made manifest. Home. Leora felt something in her chest loosen. She'd survived. Against impossible odds, she'd actually survived. Ravik turned from the front seat. Nicely done, Miss Hale. Though for the record, going 6 days past extraction deadline nearly gave His Majesty a heart attack. He was worried? Worried is insufficient. Imagine a controlled explosion of military-grade anxiety. He wanted to invade the Shadowlands personally. I had to physically restrain him at one point. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the adrenaline still coursing through her system, Leora smiled. He really cares about Order that much? He really cares about you that much. The Order thing is secondary at this point. They arrived at Black Ridge's Central Command facility as dawn broke. The building was still damaged from Thorn's bombing, scaffolding covering the eastern wing, temporary structures replacing destroyed sections. But it was standing, surviving, adapting. Thorn and Victor were taken to secure detention, separate cells, heavy guard, the kind of security reserved for people who'd tried to destroy the territory. Leora was taken to medical for evaluation. I'm fine, she protested as medics tried to examine her. You've been in the Shadowlands for 6 days eating questionable food and drinking worse water. You're getting evaluated whether you like it or not. She submitted to the examination with poor grace. Blood pressure, temperature, basic neurological tests. Everything came back normal. Remarkably resilient, the medic noted. Most people who spend 6 days in that environment come back traumatized. You seem energized. I ran on adrenaline and spite. It's a powerful combination. Well, the adrenaline will crash eventually. When it does, eat something and sleep for 12 hours. Doctor's orders. Leora nodded, but she wasn't thinking about sleep. She was thinking about the man she'd promised to come back to. She found Kyle in his office, the same severe space where she'd first met him, though now it looked less like a museum of control and more like a command center mid-crisis. He stood at the window overlooking the damaged eastern wing, his posture rigid, his hands clasped behind his back in a way that screamed military discipline, barely holding together something more volatile. You're back, he said without turning. I'm back. 6 days. You were gone 6 days. 72 hours was the maximum. You exceeded that by 3 days. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry. He turned, and Leora saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Raw, uncontrolled emotion bleeding through every crack in his armor. You were in the Shadowlands. Alone. With Thorn and Victor Cross and every violent criminal in the region. And you're sorry for exceeding the timeline? I needed more time to gain Thorn's trust, to get close enough that she'd bring me into Victor's compound, to position everyone exactly where the extraction needed them to be. You could have died, but I didn't. You could have been captured, tortured, killed and dumped in a mass grave where we'd never find your body. His voice cracked. Do you have any idea what those 6 days were like? Waiting for your signal? Wondering if every hour that passed was the hour you ran out of luck? Leora moved closer. Kyle, I spent 3 days planning forced extraction. 3 days coordinating military operations that would have started a war with the Shadowlands. 3 days imagining every worst possible outcome because you were in danger and I couldn't protect you. You did protect me. You sent Ravik. You had extraction teams ready the moment I signaled. I should never have let you go in the first place. He turned away, hands gripping the window frame. I should have found another way. Should have prioritized your safety over territorial security. Should have treated me like I was incapable of making my own choices? Leora interrupted. Should have protected me by keeping me locked in Black Ridge like a valuable asset instead of a person with agency? He didn't answer. I chose to go, she continued. I chose the risk. I chose to finish what my investigation started. You don't get to regret that choice for me. I can regret almost losing you. You didn't lose me. I'm here. I'm alive. I brought Thorn back for trial. I exposed Victor's intelligence operation. I survived the Shadowlands and came home. That's not failure, Kael. That's victory. He turned slowly. You're right. It's victory. A complete, absolute victory that nearly cost me everything that matters. Everything that matters? He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. You. You're everything that matters. Not the territory, not the council, not the perfect order I've spent my life building. You. His hands cupped her face, and she saw the carefully controlled king she'd met months ago, completely shattered into something far more dangerous. A man who'd discovered he could feel and was terrified by the intensity. When you come back, he said, voice rough, I told you we'd renegotiate the contract, that we'd do this differently. I remember. I'm done with contracts. I'm done with terms and conditions and mutually beneficial arrangements. I want... He stopped, jaw tight. I want you, not as a contract queen, not as a territorial asset, as my partner, my equal, the person who challenges everything I think I know and makes me better for it. Leora's heart hammered. That's a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. I'm chaos. You built your entire kingdom on control. We're fundamentally incompatible. We're perfectly incompatible, which is exactly why it works. His thumb brushed her cheek. You showed me that order without flexibility is rigidity. That control without humanity is just sophisticated tyranny. You made me question every system I'd built, and in questioning them, I made them better. I also exposed corruption that led to terrorism and forced you to send military operations into the Shadowlands. Minor details. Minor... He kissed her before she could finish the protest. Not the desperate kiss from before she'd left, but something deeper, more certain. A claim and a promise wrapped together. When he pulled back, his eyes were storm gray and absolutely serious. I love you. I probably loved you from the moment you improvised that toast about chaos testing order. I definitely loved you when you stood in front of the council and called out Thorn's corruption. I absolutely loved you when you walked into the Shadowlands to finish what you started. Leora's breath caught. Kael, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. But I need you to know that when I say I want you as my partner, I mean it. Not because you're useful, not because you're convenient, because you're you, and I can't imagine building anything worth having without you beside me. She looked at him. This man who'd spent his entire life avoiding emotion, who'd built walls so high they'd seemed insurmountable, who'd valued order above everything including his own humanity, and who'd just torn down every single one of those walls because she'd mattered more. I love you too, she said. Even though you're controlling and rigid and have the emotional availability of a glacier, even though you run this territory like a military operation and schedule your entire life in color-coded blocks, even though you're everything I should run from, I love you. That's the worst declaration of love I've ever heard. You want poetry? Date someone else. You want honesty? You get me. He smiled, genuinely, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. I want you, honest, chaotic, absolutely impossible you. Then you've got me, on one condition. Name it. We actually renegotiate how Blackridge operates. Not just contracts, not just my role, everything. The rigid systems, the inflexible protocols, the idea that order and humanity are mutually exclusive. We build something better. Kael considered. That's a massive undertaking. It'll take years. It'll face resistance from every corner of the council. It might fail completely. Probably will fail multiple times, but we'll adapt and try again. Controlled chaos, applied repeatedly until something works. He kissed her again. Deal. We'll burn down my perfect systems and build something better from the ashes. Our perfect systems. Our perfect disaster. I prefer beautiful experiment. I prefer you alive and arguing semantics over you in danger and silent. Someone cleared their throat. Ravik stood in the doorway looking deeply uncomfortable. Your Majesty, the council is assembled. They're ready for the debrief on the Shadowlands operation. Kael didn't move away from Leora. Tell them it was successful. Thorn and Victor are in custody. Intelligence operation disrupted. Territorial security improved. They'd like details. They'll get details when I'm ready to provide them. Right now I'm occupied. Ravik's eyebrows rose. With what? With my partner, who just spent 6 days in hell and deserves more than 3 minutes before being dragged into council proceedings. Your partner. Ravik smiled slowly. Understood, Your Majesty. I'll inform the council that debriefing is postponed until you're less occupied. He left, closing the door. Leora looked up at Kael. You just called me your partner in front of Lord Ravik. I did. He's going to tell the entire council. Probably. They're going to have opinions. They always have opinions. The question is whether I care. He traced her jawline. And I've discovered I don't. Not about this. Not about you. The king who valued order above everything is choosing chaos. The king who valued order above everything discovered that chaos, applied correctly, creates something far more valuable than control. It creates life, growth, change, actual progress instead of stagnant perfection. Leora smiled. You're getting philosophical. It's unsettling. You're a terrible influence. The worst. I wouldn't have it any other way. Done. The council debrief happened 2 hours later, after Leora had eaten, showered, and changed into clothes that didn't smell like the Shadowlands. She entered the council chamber beside Kael, and every head turned. The chamber had been partially rebuilt, new furniture, repaired walls, but the scars from Thorn's bombing were still visible, reminders that order could be broken, that systems could fail, that people could survive anyway. Members of the council, Kael began, I present Miss Leora Hale, who has successfully completed the most dangerous intelligence operation in Blackridge's history. She infiltrated the Shadowlands, gained the trust of a known terrorist, exposed Victor Cross's intelligence network, and enabled the extraction of both Thorn and Victor for trial. Silence. Then Master Chen stood. Miss Hale, I owe you an apology. When you first challenged council proceedings, I thought you were reckless. When you exposed Lady Thorn's corruption, I thought you were dangerous. When you volunteered for the Shadowlands operation, I thought you were suicidal. And now? Now I think you're all of those things, and exactly what Blackridge needed. Others nodded. Even the council members who'd been hostile before looked at her with something approaching respect. Lord Ravik spoke up. The Shadowlands operation recovered critical intelligence about Victor's network. We've identified 17 other criminal operations receiving stolen territorial secrets. All of them are being systematically dismantled. Miss Hale's work has made the entire region more secure. At significant personal risk, Celine added, for which the territory owes her profound gratitude. Leora felt something unfamiliar, recognition, not for playing a role perfectly, but for being herself, for using chaos strategically, for surviving impossible odds through improvisation and courage. Thank you, she said quietly. But I didn't do this for gratitude. I did it because Blackridge is worth protecting. Because the people here, despite your rigid systems and impossible protocols, deserve security, deserve justice, deserve a territory that adapts instead of breaking when challenged. Speaking of adaptation, Kael said, Miss Hale and I have discussed significant reforms to how Blackridge operates. We'll be proposing changes to council procedures, territorial management, and defensive protocols. Changes designed to maintain our strengths while addressing systemic rigidity. The council members exchanged glances. What kind of changes? One asked carefully. The kind where we stop treating flexibility like weakness, Leora said, where we acknowledge that perfect control is an illusion and that true strength comes from adapting to chaos rather than trying to eliminate it entirely. That's a significant philosophical shift, Master Chen observed. Yes, but the alternative is what happened with Thorn. Someone who saw the system as inflexible tried to destroy it entirely rather than reform it. We can't prevent every threat by building higher walls. Sometimes we need to build better bridges. Debate erupted. Some council members excited by the prospect of reform. Others terrified of losing the order that defined Blackridge. Kael let them argue for exactly 5 minutes. Then he raised one hand and silence fell. These reforms will be implemented gradually, he said, with full council input, with careful evaluation, with every safeguard necessary to preserve what makes Blackridge strong while improving what makes us vulnerable. But they will be implemented. It wasn't a request. It was a decree. The council acknowledged with varying degrees of enthusiasm. As the meeting concluded, people approached Leora, offering congratulations, asking questions, treating her not as a contract queen or a temporary asset, but as a permanent part of Blackridge's future. Celine was last. "I misjudged you," she said. "I thought someone who couldn't follow basic protocol was dangerous. I was right about the dangerous part, wrong about why. I'll try to be predictably dangerous." "Please don't. Blackridge needs more unpredictability, not less." She paused. "For what it's worth, Miss Hale, I'm glad you survived, and gladder still that you're staying. So am I." The trial of Morgana Thorne took 3 weeks. The proceedings were public. Every citizen of Blackridge had the right to witness justice being served against the person who'd tried to murder them. Thorne sat in the defendant's position with the same cold calculation she'd always shown. No remorse, no apology, just bitter defiance. "You built a system that crushes anyone who doesn't fit," she said, when given the chance to speak. "You created the conditions that made people like me inevitable. I'm not the villain of this story. I'm the consequence of your tyranny." Cale listened from the judge's position. Blackridge law allowed the king to preside over cases of territorial treason. "You're right," he said, and the courtroom went silent. Blackridge's systems were too rigid, too inflexible, too focused on control at the expense of humanity. Those systems created the conditions that drove you to corruption. Thorne smiled. "Then you agree I was justified?" "No, I agree the systems were flawed. Your response to those flaws, embezzlement, terrorism, attempted mass murder, that's on you. You could have challenged the systems, could have argued for reform, could have done what Miss Hale did and worked to improve things from inside." "I tried. You lined your pockets for 15 years, then tried to blow up the building when you got caught. That's not challenging systemic flaws. That's being a criminal who got exposed." The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, bombing materials traced to her purchases, communications with Victor, testimony from survivors. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came next. Blackridge law allowed for exile or imprisonment. Exile meant the Shadowlands. Imprisonment meant secure facility, lifetime supervision, no possibility of release. "Exile," Thorne said. "Send me back to the Shadowlands. At least there I'll be free of your rules." Cale considered. "No. Exile means you spread territorial secrets to anyone who'll pay. Imprisonment means you face the consequences of your actions every single day for the rest of your life. That's the sentence. Life imprisonment under maximum security, no communication with outside parties, no opportunity to cause further harm." Thorne's composure cracked. "You can't." "I can. I am. Your crimes were against this territory and its people. You'll answer to those people, not escape to chaos." She was led away screaming threats that had lost all their power. Justice served, not revenge, not brutality, just accountability within systems that were learning to bend without breaking. Victor Cross's trial was shorter. He had no allies in Blackridge, no sympathetic narrative, just a list of crimes spanning 15 years, exile to a legitimate territory that had requested his extradition for war crimes. He'd face trial there, face consequences that were years overdue. "This is all your fault," he said to Leora as guards prepared to transport him. "You should have stayed in your perfect little kingdom. Instead, you played games in territories you didn't understand." "I understood perfectly. You prey on people who have nowhere else to go. You build power on desperation. I took that power away." "You took nothing. Someone else will fill the void I leave. The Shadowlands don't change. They just find new predators." "Maybe. But at least you won't be one of them anymore." He laughed all the way to the transport vehicle. The sound of a man who'd built an empire and watched it crumble. Leora felt no satisfaction, just tired relief that it was over. Rebuilding took months. The damaged eastern wing was reconstructed, not exactly as it had been, but better. More light. More open spaces. Design that prioritized people over geometric perfection. Council procedures were reformed. more flexibility, more input from members beyond the inner circle, more acknowledgement that perfection was impossible and adaptation was necessary. The education programs that had almost been cut were expanded. Arts, music, creative development. The things that made Blackridge feel alive instead of like living inside a filing cabinet. Slowly, the territory changed. Not overnight, not without resistance, but consistently, deliberately, towards something that balanced order with humanity. And through it all, Leora worked beside Kael, not as a contract queen, not as a temporary asset, but as his partner in every sense. They argued constantly. About protocols, about reforms, about whether scheduling date nights defeated the purpose of spontaneity. They also built something remarkable, a kingdom that maintained its strengths, discipline, efficiency, strategic thinking, while shedding its weaknesses, rigidity, emotional suppression, fear of change, control and chaos working together, creating something neither could have built alone. 6 months after the Shadowlands operation, Blackridge hosted a territorial summit. Representatives from across the region gathered to discuss security cooperation, trade agreements, mutual defense, all the diplomatic functions that maintained peace. The opening ceremony was held in the rebuilt council chamber. Leora stood beside Kael on the dais, watching as ambassadors filed in. She wore formal attire, elegant but not restrictive, professional but not impersonal, a reflection of what Blackridge had become. Nervous? Kael asked quietly. Terrified. What if I improvise wrong and accidentally start a war? Then we'll adapt and fix it together. You've become very comfortable with chaos. I've become comfortable with you. The chaos is just an unavoidable side effect. She smiled. The ceremony began. Speeches were delivered. Treaties were acknowledged. When it came time for Kael to speak, he did something unprecedented. He invited Leora to address the assembly with him. Blackridge has undergone significant changes, he said to the gathered representatives. Changes that began when someone challenged our assumption that order and humanity were mutually exclusive. I'd like to introduce you to the person responsible, my partner, Leora Hale. Leora stepped forward. A year ago, she would have been terrified, would have worried about saying the wrong thing, making the wrong impression, failing to live up to impossible standards. Now, she just spoke truth. Blackridge was built on control, she said, on the belief that perfect systems create perfect outcomes. We've learned that perfection is a myth, that systems, no matter how well designed, will face challenges that require adaptation. The question isn't whether chaos will disrupt order, it's whether we're flexible enough to survive that disruption and come out stronger. She gestured to the rebuilt chamber. This room was destroyed by someone who saw our rigidity as vulnerability. We rebuilt it better, more open, more adaptable, because we learned that true strength isn't resisting change, it's embracing it strategically. The assembly listened. So Blackridge offers this to our regional partners. We will maintain our commitments to order and security, but we will also commit to flexibility, to adaptation, to acknowledging when our systems need reform and having the courage to implement that reform. We invite you to hold us accountable to both, to the order that makes us reliable and the adaptability that makes us resilient. Silence stretched. Then Ambassador Nathari, the Southern Isles representative whose cultural insult Leora had prevented at the diplomatic feast, stood and began applauding. Others joined. Not polite diplomatic acknowledgement, but genuine recognition. Leora returned to her position beside Kael, her heart hammering. That was perfect, he said quietly. I improvised half of it. I know. That's what made it perfect. Woke. The ceremony concluded without incident. Treaties were signed. Agreements were reached. As guests departed, several ambassadors made a point of speaking with Leora personally. Impressive speech, Nathuri said. An impressive survival. The Shadowlands operation is already legendary in diplomatic circles. I just did what was necessary. Necessary and brave aren't mutually exclusive. Blackridge is fortunate to have you. Others echoed the sentiment. By the time the last representative left, Leora was exhausted and overwhelmed and strangely proud. Kael found her on the balcony overlooking the city as evening fell. Tired? He asked. Completely, but good tired. He stood beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. You've transformed this territory. You know that, right? We transformed it together. You started it by being yourself, by refusing to be what I contracted for, by challenging every assumption I'd built my entire life on. Leora looked out at Blackridge, the geometric streets softened by evening light, the perfect towers made warmer by signs of actual life, people walking, laughing, living instead of just existing within systems. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Bringing chaos into your controlled kingdom? Kael considered. Every day. She blinked. Really? Every day I regret that I didn't do it sooner. That I spent years building walls against emotion when I could have been building something real. He turned to face her. You terrify me, Leora. Your improvisation, your willingness to break rules, your absolute refusal to be controlled. That's romantic. But you also make me better. Make Blackridge better. Make everything better by refusing to accept that perfect control is the answer to every problem. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Leora's breath caught. This isn't a contract, Kael said, opening it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the overcomplicated status symbols other territories favored. This is a choice, my choice to spend my life with someone who challenges me. Your choice to spend your life with someone who'll drive you crazy with scheduled date nights and color-coded planning. Kael, marry me. Not because it's logical, not because it's politically advantageous, not because it fits into some perfect system. Marry me because we're better together than apart. Because chaos and control, combined correctly, create something neither can achieve alone. Leora looked at the ring, at the man offering it, at the kingdom they'd built together from the ruins of his perfect order and her desperate gamble. Yes, she said, but I'm not doing a formal wedding with 700 guests and choreographed ceremonies. I'll settle for 50 guests and mild choreography. 20 guests and complete improvisation. 35 guests and we plan the first half. Improvise the second. Deal. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been designed for her specifically. Knowing Kael, it probably had been. She kissed him as the sun set over Blackridge, and somewhere in the city below, music drifted up. Not formal ceremony music, but something spontaneous. Street musicians, creative expression, life, chaos and order, dancing together, creating something beautiful. The wedding happened 3 months later in the rebuilt council chamber. 35 guests, exactly as negotiated. The first half was planned, traditional vows, formal proceedings, everything proper and correct. The second half dissolved into celebration that would have horrified the old Kael and delighted the new one. Musicians played, people danced, the rigid council chamber transformed into space for actual joy. Lord Ravik gave a speech that was equal parts military precision and surprising emotion. I've served under King Varen for 15 years. I've watched him build Blackridge into a fortress of order, but I've never seen him alive until Miss Hale, now Queen Hale, walked into his perfectly controlled world and set it on fire. To chaos, to control, to the perfect disaster of their partnership. Everyone drank to that. Celine approached Leora during the reception. I have a confession. Should I be worried? When you first arrived, I gave you 2 weeks maximum. I thought you'd either conform completely or be expelled for incompetence. And instead? Instead, you transformed the territory, married the king, and made me question every assumption I had about what makes someone qualified for leadership. She smiled. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for not giving up on me when I kept breaking protocol. Oh, you still break protocol constantly. I've just learned that's a feature, not a bug. The celebration continued into the night. At some point, Kael pulled Leora away from the crowd to a quiet balcony. Happy? He asked. Deliriously. You? Terrified and delighted in equal measure. So yes, happy. She leaned against him, watching stars appear over Blackridge's skyline. Do you ever think about how we started? The contract marriage, the lies I told to get the position, how wrong all of it should have gone. Constantly. Every statistical model said this would fail catastrophically. But it didn't. Because chaos isn't always destructive. Sometimes it's exactly what rigid systems need to become something better. Leora thought about the journey, from desperate lies to genuine love, from contract queen to actual queen, from chaos threatening order to chaos and order building something remarkable together. "I have a new rule for Blackridge," she said. "What's that?" "Perfect control is impossible. Perfect partnership is achievable. We focus on the second, accept the first, and build something that survives both." Kale kissed her forehead. "That's the worst rule I've ever heard. You want better rules, marry someone else." "Too late. I'm stuck with you and your terrible rules forever." "Forever's a long time." "Not long enough." They stood together as celebration continued inside, their kingdom, their people, their future built on the impossible foundation of chaos and control, learning to coexist. And in the harsh world of Blackridge, where survival once meant perfection and deviation meant destruction, a new truth emerged. The greatest victory wasn't achieving perfect order. It was building a life worth living, imperfectly and together, where chaos and control danced as partners instead of enemies. Where a desperate woman's lie became the truth that saved a kingdom. Where a king who valued order above all learned that love was worth more than any perfectly controlled system. And where chaos, applied with courage and compassion, didn't destroy civilization. It transformed it, made it human, made it real, made it home.